Welcome to this quiet journey into the past. Tonight, we will step inside the walls of a medieval castle, not in times of feasting or celebration, but during the long, uncertain days of a siege. These moments were slow and heavy, marked not by battles alone, but by endurance, rationing, quiet routines that filled each day. We will explore what daily life was like when the gates were shut, when supplies grew thin, and when the outside world seemed far away. Along the way, we will pause for a story from history. Look at the traces archaeology has left us, and reflect on how different people within the same castle experienced this difficult time. So, settle back, and imagine the hush of stone halls as the fortress waits. Imagine waking in a chamber where the air is cool and the light dim, filtered through narrow windows cut deep into the stone. Outside, the countryside is silent, fields empty, roads abandoned. Beyond the walls, an enemy waits. Inside, life adjusts to a slower, stricter rhythm. Meals are carefully measured. Bread is coarse and thin, made from flour stretched with beans or peas. Water is drawn from the well in the courtyard, each bucket lifted slowly, the creak of rope echoing upward. Fires burn less brightly, every log saved and stretched to last longer. The great hall, once filled with music, is quiet now. Families sit together on straw-covered floors, speaking in low tones. Children are kept close indoors, their games subdued. On the walls above, guards stand watch, their hours long and uneventful. Gazing out at distant tents and listening to the faint sounds of work from the enemy camp, life under siege is a cycle of waiting. Prayers are made, supplies counted, prayers whispered in the chapel. Time moves heavily, days blending together in the same routines. Yet even here, people find small comforts. A quiet song, a whispered story, or the steady light of a candle. To endure a siege was to live in suspension between fear and hope. The world narrowed to the walls around you. To understand how these quiet routines fit within real history, let us look at one of the longest and most famous sieges in medieval England, the Siege of Kenilworth Castle in the year 1266. At this time, England was caught in a struggle between King Henry III and rebellious barons who sought to limit his power. After years of tension and battles, some of the rebels retreated into Kenilworth, a great stone castle surrounded by water and strong defenses. There they prepared to endure. For 6 long months, the castle held out. Imagine the lives of those inside. Supplies dwindled slowly, and yet they continued with the same routines. Bread made from whatever grain remained, water fetched carefully, guards stationed day and night. From the walls, they would have watched the king's forces gathering outside, building engines of war, preparing to starve them into submission. Records tell us that disease eventually spread within the crowded walls. Hunger and sickness pressed down, yet the defenders persisted. Negotiations were attempted, messengers sent, terms discussed. Still, the castle held. At last, in December of that year, after months of strain, those inside agreed to surrender. They were granted terms that allowed them to leave, their lives spared, though the long endurance had left its mark. The siege of Kenilworth became remembered not for a dramatic storming of walls, but for the extraordinary patience of both sides and the endurance of those within. This story, though centuries old, helps us see the rhythms of siege life. It was not always loud or violent. Often, it was simply waiting, managing fear and hunger, and carrying on the same quiet tasks, day after day, until the end finally arrived.
How much of what we know about sieges comes not only from chronicles and letters, but from what has been left behind in the ground and the stones of castles themselves. Archaeology allows us to glimpse the quieter, more practical side of life during these long ordeals.
In some castles, the remains of hastily repaired walls can still be seen. Uneven patches where stones were added quickly to strengthen a breach. Inside courtyards, archaeologists have uncovered fire pits, traces of makeshift cooking areas set up when the kitchens became too crowded. In storerooms, they sometimes find broken jars or scorched pottery, reminders of food cooked and consumed when resources were scarce. Even rubbish pits tell a story. Bones of animals show which foods were eaten. Sometimes they reveal desperate substitutions, the remains of horses or dogs eaten when supplies ran out. While grim, these finds show us the realities of endurance. Alongside them are also more ordinary items: wooden bowls, worn shoes, fragments of cloth, giving us a sense of everyday survival. Siege engines, too, leave their traces. Large stones, once hurled by catapults, have been found embedded in castle walls or lying in ditches. Some still bear marks of their flight. These objects remind us not only of destruction, but also of the slow battle of patience, each side building, throwing, and waiting. Within castles that stood long after their sieges ended, archaeologists sometimes uncover hidden passages or secret posterns. Small doors at the base of walls, designed for carrying messages or sneaking out under cover of night. These features hint at the ingenuity and quiet risks taken during times when every option mattered. What archaeology offers is not the noise of battle, but the echo of ordinary persistence. A chipped pot, a worn tool, a patched wall. Together, these fragments build a picture of what it truly meant to live within stone walls under the weight of a siege. Not everyone experienced siege life in the same way. Within the walls of a castle, there were layers of society, and even in hardship, those divisions could be clearly felt. For the lords and ladies, the great chambers still provided more comfort than the crowded halls below. Their rooms were larger, with thick tapestries to soften the cold, and their meals, though diminished, were still better than those of the servants or soldiers. They might have received a greater share of the dwindling stores. More meat, more bread, or a little wine, while others made do with thinner fare. The nobles also carried the weight of decision-making. They discussed strategy with their captains, debated whether to fight on or considered surrender. Each choice was a balance between pride, duty, and survival. Their days might have included time in the chapel, private conversations, and the maintenance of appearances. For authority had to be preserved even in the face of hunger. For common soldiers and servants, life was more monotonous and more physically demanding. Guards stood long watches on the walls, their food plainer, their beds harder. Servants hauled water, carried fuel, and managed tasks that grew more difficult as supplies ran low. In the great hall, families of retainers slept close together, their belongings bundled at their sides. Yet despite these contrasts, a siege also created a sense of shared experience. When the gates were closed, everyone within relied on the same walls, the same wells, and the same endurance. The divisions between high and low, while still present, blurred slightly under the pressure of survival. Lords depended on the loyalty of their followers, and servants depended on the decisions of their lords. In this way, a castle under siege became a small world, closed and fragile, where daily life reflected both the contrasts and the connections of medieval society. And so, our journey through a besieged medieval castle comes to a quiet close. We began by stepping into the daily routines of those inside the walls. The rationed meals, the long watches on the battlements, and the subdued rhythm of life under strain. We paused at the story of Kenilworth, where endurance and patience defined half a year of waiting behind stone walls. We looked at the traces that archaeology has left us: broken pottery, patched walls, and discarded stones from siege engines. Each a small whisper from the past. We reflected on the contrasts of life within the castle, from the chambers of lords to the crowded halls of their servants, bound together by circumstance. A siege was a time of waiting more than of battle. It was marked less by sudden moments, more by slow days that blended into one another. Days of quiet effort, of persistence, and of shared survival. Now, as you listen, in the stillness of the present, it is easy to feel how far away that world is. The stone walls, the guarded gates, the long uncertainty of rationed days, all are gone. What remains is only memory, softened by time and carried gently into story. Let that distance bring you comfort. The castle is quiet now. The siege has ended. And you need only rest, safe in the calm of your own surroundings.
At